You think you know what lies at the bottom of the world, a frozen wasteland, miles of ice, penguins and research stations and scientists drilling core samples. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, most inhospitable continent on Earth. Nothing lives there permanently except microscopic organisms and the occasional visiting researcher. At least that's what you've been told. But what if the frozen continent holds a secret so profound that every major government on Earth has agreed to keep it hidden? What if the most isolated place on the planet isn't empty at all, but home to something that predates human civilization itself? This is the story of what lies beneath the Antarctic ice, and why you were never supposed to know about it. On December 2nd, 1946, the largest Antarctic expedition in history departed from Norfolk, Virginia. Operation Highjump, as it was called, included 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and nearly 5,000 men. The commander was Admiral Richard E. Byrd, America's most famous polar explorer, the first person confirmed to have reached both poles by air. The official purpose was scientific research and training for cold weather operations. The United States wanted to establish a presence in Antarctica and learn how to operate military equipment in extreme conditions, standard Cold War preparation. But the scale of the operation told a different story. Operation Highjump wasn't a scientific expedition, it was a military invasion force. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, thousands of combat-trained personnel, enough firepower to fight a small war. Against whom? Antarctica had no enemy nations, no military installations, no strategic targets. The continent was uninhabited, claimed by no one, defended by nothing except the weather itself. So why did the United States send a battle fleet? The answer begins 8 years earlier, on the other side of the world. In 1938, Nazi Germany launched an expedition to Antarctica under the command of Captain Alfred Richer. The ship MS Schwabenland carried 2 Dornier flying boats that spent weeks mapping the Antarctic coast, photographing hundreds of thousands of square kilometers and dropping metal markers bearing swastikas to claim the territory for the Reich. They called it Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. The official purpose was securing whaling rights and establishing a German territorial presence, but the expedition's activities went far beyond simple cartography. According to documents captured by Allied forces after the war and later analyzed by the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, Richer's aircraft detected something unexpected during their flights over the interior, heat signatures, in the coldest place on Earth. Thermal readings indicated warm zones deep in the continental interior, temperatures registering 15 to 20 degrees Celsius in areas where the ice should have been miles thick, evidence of open water in locations that should have been frozen solid, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be cave entrances, openings in the ice that led somewhere below the surface. Richer sent coded messages to Berlin. The contents of those messages remain classified in German archives to this day, but the response from the Nazi leadership was immediate. Resources began flowing toward Antarctic operations. U-boats were assigned to South Atlantic Patrol with unusual frequency. Supply runs to remote coordinates became a regular feature of German naval activity. Something had been found, and the Reich wanted more of it. What we do know is what happened in the war's final days. In July 1945, 2 months after Germany surrendered, U-boat U-530 surfaced at Mar del Plata, Argentina. The submarine had been at sea for over 2 months since the war ended. Its captain, Otto Vermuth, refused to explain where the vessel had been or what it had been carrying. Investigators were particularly interested in the crew's activities. The full transcripts remain classified, but partial records released decades later reveal that investigators were particularly interested in the submarine's Antarctic activities. 6 weeks later, on August 17th, U-977 surfaced at the same Argentine port. Its captain, Heinz Schäfer, had an even longer gap in his voyage to explain. Like Vermuth, he maintained silence about critical portions of the journey. Like the crew of U-530, his men refused to break under interrogation. Maritime historians who have reconstructed the probable routes of both submarines agree on one thing. Both vessels would have had to travel through Antarctic waters to arrive when and where they did. Both carried cargo that was never inventoried or recovered. Both crews maintained their silence until death. What were they delivering? To whom? And why was Antarctica worth such risk in the chaos of Germany's collapse? The United States clearly believed something significant was there. Operation Highjump wasn't organized to study weather patterns or train cold weather troops. It was organized to find whatever the Germans had found and to assess whether it posed a threat to American security. Admiral Byrd's expedition arrived in Antarctic waters in late December 1946. For the next 8 weeks, aircraft conducted extensive reconnaissance missions, photographing the coastline and venturing deep into the interior. Ships mapped the coastal waters. Personnel established temporary camps on the ice shelf. And then, abruptly, everything stopped. The expedition was planned to last 6 to 8 months. It ended after approximately 8 weeks. The official explanation cited the approaching Antarctic winter, which would make continued operations dangerous. This explanation has been accepted by most mainstream historians, but the circumstances suggest a different story. On February 3, 1947, 3 crew members of a PBM Mariner flying boat lost their lives when their aircraft went down in the Antarctic interior. Their names were Wendell K. Henderson, Maxwell A. Lopez, and Frederick W. Williams. The Navy recovered their bodies weeks later. Their deaths are a matter of public record, documented in official naval archives. But declassified flight logs analyzed by naval historians in the 1990s suggest there may have been another aircraft lost that day. Records show a reconnaissance flight scheduled for coordinates deep in the interior, coordinates that don't correspond to any location mentioned in official expedition reports. The aircraft assigned to that flight doesn't appear in subsequent mission logs. No crew roster for that flight has ever been released. If this aircraft existed, it was never found. Its crew was never recovered. Whatever it encountered before it vanished was never reported through official channels. What is documented is Admiral Byrd's behavior after February 3rd. Aircraft that had been conducting interior reconnaissance missions were grounded within hours. Ships that had been positioning for extended operations were ordered to prepare for immediate departure. The entire expedition began withdrawing from Antarctic waters, abandoning months of planned activities. Admiral Byrd returned to the United States and reportedly met with President Truman and Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal in a closed session. No official record of that meeting exists in public archives. No summary was released. No participants ever discussed what was said, but Byrd's subsequent public statements suggest that something profound had occurred. In March 1947, Byrd gave an interview to Chilean newspaper El Mercurio that has puzzled researchers ever since. The interview is real. The text has been preserved in newspaper archives, and what Byrd said makes no sense in the context of 1947 military technology. He spoke of aircraft that could fly from pole to pole at tremendous speeds. He warned that the United States would need to prepare for enemies who could attack from the polar regions. He described Antarctica as a territory of vital importance for future security, suggesting that conflicts to come would be defined by control of polar approaches. In 1947, no nation had aircraft that could fly from pole to pole. The Soviet Union had no polar attack capability. Neither did any other power on Earth. Intercontinental ballistic missiles didn't exist. Polar route bombers were years from development. Byrd appeared to be warning about threats that no known nation could pose, unless he had encountered something that expanded his understanding of what was possible. Unless he had seen technology that didn't come from any country he knew. Byrd led one more Antarctic expedition, in 1955-56 Operation Deep Freeze, which established permanent American research stations on the continent. He died in March 1957, just months after returning from the ice. Whatever secrets he carried, he took most of them to his grave. But the secrecy around Antarctica was just beginning. In 1959, something remarkable happened. 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, establishing the frozen continent as a demilitarized zone dedicated to peaceful scientific research. The signatories included the United States and the Soviet Union, bitter Cold War enemies who agreed on almost nothing else. The treaty prohibited military activity, nuclear testing, and territorial claims. It established freedom of scientific investigation and required that research results be shared openly. It created an inspection regime allowing any signatory nation to examine any other nation's facilities. This is extraordinary when you consider the historical context. In 1959, the Cold War was at its peak. The Berlin crisis was ongoing. The U-2 spy plane program was in full operation. The Soviet Union and United States were building nuclear arsenals capable of destroying human civilization. They trusted each other with nothing. They competed for advantage everywhere on the planet, everywhere except Antarctica. The conventional explanation is that Antarctica had no strategic value, so cooperation cost nothing. Both superpowers could afford to be generous about territory neither could use. But this explanation collapses under scrutiny. Cold War strategists saw value everywhere. They fought proxy wars in jungles and deserts that offered nothing of obvious importance. They spent billions establishing bases in remote locations just to deny them to the other side. They would never voluntarily surrender any territory, no matter how distant or difficult, unless they had a compelling reason. What was that reason? Consider the treaty's provisions more carefully. No military activity. This ensures that no nation can establish a military presence capable of defending or controlling whatever exists in the interior. No nuclear testing. This prevents any nation from using nuclear weapons to excavate or destroy whatever might be buried under the ice. No territorial claims. This ensures that no nation can assert sovereign control over any Antarctic discovery. Mandatory sharing of scientific research. This ensures that no nation can develop a secret understanding of Antarctic conditions that others don't share. Open inspection rights. This ensures that no nation can hide what it's doing on the continent. These aren't the provisions of a scientific cooperation agreement. These are the provisions of a mutual containment pact. Something exists in Antarctica that the world's major powers agreed must be isolated, controlled, and kept from public knowledge. Something so significant that mortal enemies put aside their conflict to ensure it remained contained. For 65 years, the Antarctic Treaty has held. Whatever lies beneath the ice remains whatever lies beneath the ice remains hidden, but secrets have a way of surfacing. In the decades since Operation Highjump, evidence has accumulated. Classified documents have been leaked by whistleblowers and released through declassification programs. Researchers using modern technology have detected anomalies that can't be explained by conventional geology. Satellite imagery has revealed patterns beneath the ice that shouldn't exist in nature. Something ancient lies beneath the frozen surface. Something vast. Something that challenges everything we think we know about human history and our place on this planet. And the evidence suggests it isn't dead. In the next chapter, we'll examine what researchers have actually found beneath the Antarctic ice. The structures that don't match any known human construction. The heat signatures that defy explanation. The evidence of something that was building cities when our ancestors were still living in caves. The frozen continent has kept its secret for 12,000 years. That secret is about to surface. To understand what might exist beneath the Antarctic ice, you need to understand how old that ice really is. The ice sheet that covers Antarctica today began forming approximately 34 million years ago, when the continent drifted to its current polar position and global temperatures dropped enough to allow permanent glaciation. Before that, Antarctica was a temperate landmass, covered in forests, inhabited by wildlife, connected by land bridges to South America and Australia. Fossil evidence proves this beyond doubt. Dinosaur bones have been discovered within a few hundred miles of the South Pole. Petrified wood from ancient forests lies preserved in Antarctic rock. The continent was once green, warm, and teeming with life. But the structures that researchers have detected beneath the ice aren't 34 million years old. They're much younger, and that creates a problem that conventional history cannot solve. In 2012, a team of researchers from multiple nations completed a project called BedMap 2, the most detailed survey of the Antarctic ice sheet ever conducted. Using ice-penetrating radar, satellite measurements, and seismic data, they mapped the terrain hidden beneath miles of frozen water. What they found beneath the eastern Antarctic ice sheet defied easy explanation. The data revealed massive anomalies in the bedrock topography, formations that appeared too regular to be natural, geometric patterns that repeated across distances of hundreds of kilometers, structures that bore no resemblance to any known geological process. The official interpretation attributed these anomalies to ancient river valleys and tectonic formations. Natural processes operating over millions of years could produce unusual shapes, scientists explained. What looked artificial was simply an artifact of how ice-penetrating radar rendered natural terrain, but not everyone was convinced. Independent analysts who examined the bed map, two data noted features that the official interpretation struggled to explain. Right angles appearing repeatedly across the landscape, linear formations running parallel to each other for dozens of miles, rectangular depressions that looked less like geological features and more like foundations. One formation in particular attracted attention. Located in an area of eastern Antarctica known as Wilkes Land, the anomaly measured approximately 250 kilometers across. Its shape was roughly circular, but its internal structure showed geometric regularity that set it apart from natural crater formations. Heat sensors detected thermal activity beneath the formation that couldn't be explained by volcanic processes. The official explanation classified it as a possible meteor impact crater, perhaps formed by an asteroid strike 250 million years ago. This explanation satisfied most mainstream scientists, but it didn't explain the heat signatures, and it didn't explain why the formation's internal geometry looked more like architecture than impact damage. In 2006, researchers discovered something that made the Wilkes land anomaly even more puzzling. Gravity measurements over the region detected a massive concentration of dense material buried beneath the ice. The anomaly, which scientists called the Wilkes land gravity anomaly, suggested something enormous lying hidden in the frozen bedrock. Initial estimates placed its mass at billions of tons, far larger than any known geological formation of its type. Some researchers proposed that the gravity anomaly represented a chunk of ultra-dense asteroid material, a remnant of the hypothetical ancient impact. Others suggested it might be a concentration of heavy minerals, perhaps iron or nickel deposits of unusual purity, but neither explanation fully accounted for the readings. The gravity signature didn't match the profile of meteor debris. It didn't match known mineral deposits. It matched nothing in the geological literature. It matched something constructed, something engineered, something placed there deliberately. Consider what would produce such a gravity signature: a concentration of dense materials arranged in a specific pattern, buried beneath miles of ice. Not scattered debris from an impact, not natural mineral veins following geological fault lines, something built. The technology to construct such a structure doesn't exist in human civilization, but what if it existed somewhere else? What if it existed long before humans developed the capability to record history? In 2014, researchers from the University of Texas Institute for Geophysics conducted an airborne radar survey of the East Antarctic ice sheet. They were mapping thermal conditions beneath the ice, looking for evidence of geothermal activity and subglacial water systems. What they found near the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains defied their expectations. The Gamburtsev mountains are a mystery in themselves, a range of peaks the size of the European Alps buried beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. No volcanic activity has been detected in the region. No geological process adequately explains how they formed or why they remain thermally active. Yet the 2014 survey detected sustained temperatures suggesting liquid water in areas with no volcanic heat source. The researchers documented thermal signatures that seemed to generate themselves, heat that had no apparent origin. The study was published in peer-reviewed journals. The data was made available to the scientific community, and no satisfactory explanation was ever provided. Heat requires energy. Energy requires a source. In regions far from volcanic activity, far from radioactive decay sufficient to warm bedrock, where was the energy coming from? Unless the energy wasn't geological at all. Unless it was technological. Consider what would be required to maintain a habitable environment beneath miles of ice. You would need a sustained energy source, something capable of generating heat continuously for thousands of years without exhausting its fuel. You would need a way to regulate that heat, preventing it from melting the ice above too quickly and exposing your location. You would need engineering on a scale that human civilization has never achieved. Such technology doesn't exist in our world, but the thermal signatures suggest it exists somewhere beneath Antarctica. This brings us to the question that mainstream archaeology refuses to address. What was happening on Earth 12,000 years ago? According to conventional history, not much. Human beings existed, but we were primitive hunter-gatherers, living in small nomadic bands, using stone tools, leaving no permanent structures. The great civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, and the Indus Valley were still thousands of years in the future. Writing hadn't been invented. Agriculture hadn't begun. Humans were clever animals, nothing more. But what if this picture is incomplete? 12,000 years ago, the last ice age was ending. Sea levels were rising rapidly as massive glaciers melted across the northern hemisphere. Coastlines that had been exposed for thousands of years were drowning beneath rising waters. Any civilization that existed along those coastlines would have been submerged, its remains buried beneath hundreds of feet of water. We've already seen evidence of such submerged structures in the ocean investigation that preceded this one. The formations at Yonaguni, Japan, where stepped structures resembling pyramids rise from the seafloor. The anomalies in the Gulf of Combat, India, where geometric patterns suggest a city dating to 9,000 years ago. The sonar contacts off the coast of Cuba, where researchers detected what appeared to be massive stone structures at depths that should be impossible for any known civilization. Antarctica presents the same puzzle, but on a vastly larger scale. If advanced structures exist beneath the Antarctic ice, they were built during a period when the continent was more accessible than it is today. This could mean during warming cycles within the current ice age, when parts of the coastal regions were temporarily ice-free, or it could mean before the ice sheet formed entirely, which would place construction before modern humans existed. The first scenario suggests that human civilization is far older than we believe. Thousands of years of history have been lost, buried beneath ice and water, erased from our collective memory. The second scenario suggests something more disturbing. If the structures predate humanity, then something else built them. Something intelligent, something capable of engineering on a planetary scale. Something that was here before us, and possibly something that remains here still. The evidence doesn't tell us which scenario is true, but it tells us that one of them must be. This brings us to what intelligence agencies have called the exchange. Documents captured after World War II and analyzed by Allied intelligence agencies, described transactions between the German Antarctic expeditions and something they encountered beneath the ice. A 1946 OSS report, portions of which were declassified in the 1990s, referenced technical materials of non-standard origin recovered from a German research facility in Austria. The report noted that the materials exceeded current manufacturing capabilities by what analysts estimated to be 15 to 20 years. The source of these materials was listed in the document as Antarctic Acquisition, see File 7734. File 7734 has never been declassified. References to it appear in multiple documents from the period, always in connection with Antarctic operations, always with the highest classification markings. What did the Germans acquire, and from whom? Consider the technological leaps that occurred in German weapons programs during the final years of the war. The Messerschmitt Me 262 became the world's first operational jet fighter in 1944. Just 6 years earlier, jet propulsion was considered a theoretical concept with no practical application. The engineering required to progress from theory to combat aircraft in 6 years has never been adequately explained by historians of technology. The Me 262 incorporated design elements that aeronautical engineers of the era shouldn't have understood. The V-2 rocket, which became the foundation for both American and Soviet space programs, contained guidance systems that exceeded what contemporary electronics should have been able to achieve. Scientists who examined captured V-2s after the war noted components they couldn't identify and manufacturing techniques they couldn't replicate. German submarine designs from 1944 and 1945 incorporated stealth features and propulsion concepts that wouldn't appear in other nations' navies for decades. The Type 21 submarine was so advanced that its basic design influenced submarine construction into the 1980s. The conventional explanation attributes these advances to German desperation. A losing war concentrated resources on wonder weapons, hoping for technological miracles that could reverse defeat. But desperation doesn't explain the specific nature of these advances. It doesn't explain why they appeared so suddenly, and it doesn't explain the references to Antarctic acquisition in captured documents. The exchange would explain everything: technology for resources, knowledge for access, a transaction between a desperate human power and something far older and more advanced. If this exchange occurred, it ended with Germany's defeat. The submarine supply runs to Antarctica ceased. Whatever relationship had existed was severed. The Americans and Soviets who divided Germany's technological spoils inherited fragments of the arrangement, enough to understand that something unprecedented existed beneath the southern ice. Operation Highjump was the American attempt to assess that something, and whatever Admiral Byrd's expedition encountered was significant enough to trigger the diplomatic process that led to the Antarctic Treaty. The treaty makes perfect sense as a response to this discovery. Multiple nations had detected the same anomalies. Multiple nations had realized that something existed beneath the ice, that none of them could control individually. The only rational response was cooperation, an agreement that no single power would attempt to exploit or weaponize whatever had been found. Consider the alternative. Imagine if the United States or Soviet Union had attempted to establish military control over the Antarctic interior during the height of the Cold War. They would have been attempting to confront an intelligence that had been engineering on a planetary scale, while humans were still living in caves, an intelligence that had maintained a functioning installation for thousands of years, an intelligence that possessed capabilities beyond anything human science could match. Such a confrontation could have ended human civilization. Both superpowers understood this, and so they agreed to contain, rather than confront. But containment isn't understanding. Quarantine isn't control. For 65 years, the world's governments have maintained their Antarctic agreement. They've monitored the continent, they've restricted access, they've kept the public ignorant of what lies beneath the ice, and during all that time the entities have remained silent. No communication, no demands, no obvious activity beyond the maintenance of their installation. But silence isn't absence. Waiting isn't inaction. The entities beneath Antarctica have been there for thousands of years, perhaps far longer. They built structures that dwarf anything humanity has constructed. They developed technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive. They watched as human civilization developed from scattered tribes to a global species, and according to evidence that has emerged in recent years, they may be preparing to end their silence. The thermal activity beneath the ice has been increasing. Seismic patterns have been detected that don't match any natural process. Something is changing in the frozen depths, something that has been dormant for millennia. In the next chapter, we'll examine the evidence that the entities beneath Antarctica are waking up, that the moment they've been waiting for is approaching, and that humanity may soon face a reckoning with something older than our species, something that has been watching us develop, and something that may finally be ready to make contact. The ice has kept its secret since before recorded history, but ice melts, and what lies beneath is stirring. In 2016, something changed beneath the Antarctic ice. Seismic monitoring stations across the continent detected a series of unusual signals emanating from deep beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. The signals weren't earthquakes. They weren't volcanic tremors. They didn't match any known geological process. They were rhythmic, repeating, almost mechanical in their precision. The signals originated from the region near the Wilkes land anomaly, the same area where researchers had detected the massive gravity signature and unexplained thermal activity. For 3 weeks, the pulses continued at irregular intervals, sometimes hours apart, sometimes minutes. Then, as suddenly as they began, they stopped. The official explanation attributed the signals to icequakes, sudden cracking of the ice sheet caused by thermal stress. Such events do occur in Antarctica, and they can produce unusual seismic signatures. Case closed. But scientists who analyzed the raw data noticed something the official explanation didn't address. The signals showed internal structure, not the random noise of cracking ice, but organized patterns within each pulse, frequency variations that repeated in sequences, amplitude changes that followed mathematical progressions. One researcher, speaking anonymously to a scientific publication, described the signals as more like a transmission than a natural phenomenon. The comment was quickly walked back, attributed to speculation rather than analysis, but the raw data remained, available to anyone who knew where to look. Similar signals have been detected before. In 1997, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's underwater listening system detected an ultra-low frequency sound in the southern Pacific Ocean. The sound, nicknamed the bloop, was one of the loudest ever recorded in the ocean. Its acoustic profile suggested a biological origin, but to produce such a sound, the creature would need to be many times larger than a blue whale. NOAA eventually attributed the bloop to ice calving from Antarctic glaciers, but acoustic researchers noted that the bloop's signature didn't match known ice sounds. Its frequency profile was different, its duration was wrong. Something had produced that sound, and despite official explanations, no one could definitively identify what. The bloop originated from coordinates in the Southern Ocean, roughly aligned with the Antarctic interior. It was detected once and never repeated, as if something had sent a single signal and then gone silent. 19 years later, the 2016 seismic events occurred. Different type of signal, different detection method, but the same region, the same unexplained patterns, the same official dismissal. What if these events are connected? What if something beneath Antarctica has been periodically active, sending signals that our instruments detect but our scientists refuse to acknowledge? The monitoring of Antarctic anomalies extends far beyond what the public knows. During the Cold War, both superpowers established extensive sensor networks across the southern continent. Officially, these sensors monitored for nuclear tests and tracked seismic activity. Unofficially, according to documents that have emerged through various channels, they were watching for something else. The United States operated a classified program known as Project Iceworm, which was publicly acknowledged only decades after its termination. The official purpose was testing nuclear missile deployments beneath the Greenland ice sheet. But documents suggest that similar programs operated in Antarctica, focused not on weapons testing but on detection and monitoring. Detection of what? The Soviet Union maintained equally secretive programs. Their Vostok station, established in 1957 and still operating today, sits atop one of the most scientifically significant locations in Antarctica, directly above Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake the size of Lake Ontario that has been sealed beneath the ice for millions of years. The official purpose of Vostok Station is climate research and ice core sampling. Soviet and later Russian scientists have drilled into the ice for decades, extracting cores that reveal Earth's climate history going back hundreds of thousands of years. But Vostok Station is also positioned directly above a major thermal anomaly. The lake beneath it maintains liquid water, despite being buried under 2.5 miles of ice. Something is generating the heat necessary to keep that water from freezing. In 2012, Russian researchers finally drilled through to Lake Vostok itself, penetrating the ancient water for the first time. What they found has never been fully disclosed. Initial reports mentioned unusual microbial life, organisms that had evolved in isolation for millions of years. This was scientifically significant but not unexpected. What was unexpected, according to sources who claim familiarity with the classified portions of the research, was evidence of artificial structures on the lake bed. Geometric formations visible in underwater imaging, linear features that didn't match natural geological processes, shapes that suggested construction rather than erosion. The Russian government classified the detailed findings and restricted further publication. The drilling program was suspended. Scientists who had worked on the project were reassigned. Lake Vostok isn't the only subglacial lake in Antarctica. More than 400 have been identified beneath the ice sheet, connected by a network of channels and rivers that flow beneath the frozen surface. Some of these lakes show thermal anomalies similar to Vostok. Some have never been drilled or explored. What exists in those hidden waters? The network of subglacial lakes presents a possibility that researchers have only recently begun to consider. What if the structures beneath Antarctica aren't isolated installations? What if they're connected? What if the lakes and channels that flow beneath the ice serve as corridors, linking a vast underground system? The thermal anomalies would make sense in this context. Heat generated at one location could be distributed throughout the network, maintaining habitable conditions across enormous distances. The seismic signals detected in 2016 could be communication, pulses traveling through the subglacial water system from one installation to another. This would explain why the anomalies appear in multiple locations rather than just one. This would explain why the signatures are consistent across sites, separated by hundreds of miles. This would explain why drilling at Lake Vostok produced such alarming results that the Russians immediately classified everything and stopped the program. Antarctica isn't hiding a single secret, it's hiding a system. The implications extend beyond the frozen continent. If an advanced intelligence built a network of installations beneath Antarctica, why would they limit themselves to one continent? The same technology that could construct and maintain structures under miles of ice could presumably operate anywhere on Earth. And indeed, similar anomalies have been detected elsewhere. In the deep oceans, sonar surveys have revealed geometric formations on the seafloor that defy geological explanation. We examined these in detail in our previous investigation, the structures at Yonaguni, the formations in the Gulf of Combat, the sonar contacts off Cuba. Each site shows the same characteristics: geometric precision, construction that shouldn't exist, dating that challenges conventional history. In remote deserts, satellite imaging has detected buried structures that don't match any known archaeological sites. In mountain ranges, thermal surveys have found heat signatures that have no volcanic explanation. In ocean trenches, pressure-resistant instruments have recorded sounds that match no known source. What if all of these anomalies are connected? What if Antarctica is just one node in a planetary network? The concept isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. If an intelligence possessed technology capable of building permanent installations beneath Antarctic ice, they would possess technology far beyond anything humanity has developed. Such an intelligence would think in terms of planetary systems, not individual sites. They would build redundancy into their network, ensuring that no single point of failure could compromise their presence on Earth. They would also be patient. An intelligence that has existed for thousands of years, perhaps millions, would operate on timescales we can barely comprehend. What seems like silence to us might be simple waiting. What seems like inactivity might be observation. And what seems like sudden awakening might be the completion of a plan that began before humanity existed. The 2016 seismic signals weren't the only unusual activity detected in recent years. In 2018, satellites detected what appeared to be a massive void beneath the Thwaites Glacier in West Antarctica. The cavity measured approximately 6 miles by 1,000 feet, large enough to have contained 14 billion tons of ice. Scientists attributed the void to rapid ice, melting from below, caused by warming ocean water, but the rate of melting didn't match climate models. Something was generating heat beneath Thwaites at a rate that exceeded predictions by orders of magnitude. We're weak, barely distinguishable from background noise, but their pattern was distinctive, not random interference, but organized emissions at specific frequencies. In 2021, an Italian-Australian research team published findings about a previously unknown subglacial river system beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. The river, measuring nearly 300 miles in length, flows beneath the ice in ways that current glaciological models couldn't predict. Its existence suggests that the subglacial environment is far more dynamic and interconnected than scientists had assumed. Dynamic, interconnected, active. Each year brings new discoveries. Each discovery challenges previous assumptions. Each challenge points toward the same conclusion. Something is happening beneath the Antarctic ice that we don't understand and haven't been told about. The question is whether we'll learn the truth before the truth learns us. Consider what the entities beneath Antarctica might be waiting for. If they've been present on Earth since before human civilization, they've watched us develop from scattered tribes to a global species. They've seen us develop agriculture, writing, mathematics, science. They've seen us split the atom and reach for the stars. They've watched as our technology advanced from stone tools to spacecraft in a mere blink of geological time, and they've seen us bring ourselves to the brink of destruction more than once. The Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cold War arms race, climate change, engineered pandemics, artificial intelligence. Each generation produces new threats to human survival, new ways we might destroy ourselves before reaching our potential. What if the entities are waiting to see whether we survive? What if the network beneath Antarctica is a test, or a threshold, or a gateway that only opens for species mature enough to pass through? The thermal activity has been increasing. The seismic signals have become more frequent. The electromagnetic emissions have grown stronger. All of the evidence suggests that something is building toward a moment of significance. The Antarctic Treaty Nations have noticed. Classified briefings, according to sources who have attended them, now include dedicated sections on subsurface activity monitoring. Military budgets include line items for Antarctic operations that don't appear in public documents. Research stations have been equipped with sensors and communication systems far more sophisticated than scientific research requires. The governments of the world are preparing for something they've been preparing since 1959, and whatever they're expecting, they don't think the public is ready to know about it. In the final chapter, we'll examine what that preparation looks like, the secret facilities, the contingency plans, the question of what happens when the entities beneath the ice decide their waiting is over. Something ancient is waking up at the bottom of the world, and humanity may not have much longer to prepare for what comes next. On a classified server maintained by an international consortium with no public name, there is a monitoring system that has been running since 1978. It tracks Antarctic anomaly data, thermal signatures, seismic patterns, electromagnetic emissions, gravitational fluctuations. Every sensor placed on or beneath the southern ice feeds into this system, and the data is analyzed according to algorithms that have been refined over nearly 5 decades. The system has a single purpose: to detect the moment when activity levels cross a predetermined threshold. That threshold has a name. Officials who have access to the system call it the Convergence, and according to sources who claim familiarity with recent classified briefings, the indicators have been accelerating toward that threshold for the past decade. What was projected to occur in the late 21st century now appears to be approaching much sooner. The Convergence, as described in documents spanning multiple decades, refers to a projected moment when the entities beneath Antarctica initiate open contact with human civilization. A 1978 NSA memorandum, partially declassified in 2017, first referenced convergence protocols in connection with Antarctic monitoring operations. A 1983 CIA assessment used identical terminology when describing contingency planning for subsurface contact scenarios. By the 1990s, the term had become standard vocabulary in classified briefings across multiple agencies and allied nations. Not contact as we typically imagine it, not spacecraft landing on the White House lawn, not radio signals from distant stars, contact from within, from something that has been here all along, watching, waiting, preparing for the moment when humanity was ready to learn the truth. Or perhaps preparing for the moment when the truth could no longer be hidden. The linguistic analysis we examined in Chapter 2 yielded more than descriptions of technology. Hidden within the symbol patterns, according to researchers who spent decades attempting translation, were references to cycles, vast periods of time that seemed to describe a recurring process. The symbols describe species rising, developing, reaching critical thresholds, and then either joining something larger or destroying themselves. This pattern, the translations suggest, repeats across the cosmos. Intelligent life emerges, it develops technology, it gains the power to reshape its environment, and then it reaches a point where its technological capability exceeds its wisdom to use it safely. Most species fail at this threshold. They destroy themselves through war, environmental collapse, engineered plagues, or artificial intelligences that escape control. The galaxy, if these translations are accurate, is filled with the remnants of civilizations that almost made it, worlds that went silent, technologies that outlasted their creators, archives of species that had potential but couldn't survive their own success. But some species survive. Some species develop the wisdom to match their power, and those species, according to the symbols, are welcomed into a larger community of minds that spans the cosmos. The entities beneath Antarctica appear to be caretakers of this process, observers stationed on developing worlds, guardians who monitor and perhaps subtly guide promising species, judges who ultimately determine whether a civilization deserves to join the community or whether it will become another archaeological curiosity in the galactic record. The convergence is the moment of judgment. This interpretation explains much of what we've documented throughout this investigation. It explains why the entities have remained hidden. Contact before humanity was ready would have been counterproductive, perhaps even harmful. We needed to develop on our own, to earn our advancement rather than having it handed to us. It explains the network's global scope. If the entities are evaluating humanity as a species, they would need observation points across the entire planet, not just Antarctica. The ocean installations we examined in our previous investigation, the desert sites detected by satellite imaging, the mountain locations with anomalous heat signatures, all of them serving as nodes in a planetary monitoring system. It explains the increasing activity in recent decades. Humanity has been approaching the threshold with accelerating speed. Nuclear weapons since 1945, genetic engineering since the 1970s. Artificial intelligence advancing exponentially since the 2000s, climate manipulation becoming possible. Each decade brings new capabilities that could either elevate us or destroy us, and it explains why governments have maintained such careful secrecy. Premature disclosure could trigger exactly the kind of societal collapse that would guarantee our failure. The very act of revealing the truth could doom us, but secrecy has limits, and those limits are being reached. The ice is melting. Climate change is transforming Antarctica faster than at any point in recorded history. According to NASA satellite measurements, the continent is losing approximately 150 billion tons of ice per year, a rate that has tripled since 2012. Glaciers that have been stable for millennia are retreating. Ice shelves are collapsing into the sea. The frozen barrier that has separated the entities from the surface world is growing thinner year by year. The Thwaites Glacier alone contains enough ice to raise global sea levels by over 2 feet if it collapses entirely. But Thwaites also sits atop one of the most significant anomaly clusters detected in Antarctica, the massive void discovered beneath it in 2018, the thermal signatures that exceed what warming oceans can explain, the electromagnetic emissions detected in 2020. If Thwaites collapses, it won't just flood coastal cities. It will expose whatever lies beneath it to open air and satellite observation. Current projections suggest major Antarctic ice shelves could fail within 30 years. Some researchers argue the timeline could be even shorter. Each year brings new records for ice loss, new data showing acceleration beyond previous models. The entities may be aware of this timeline. The increasing activity detected in recent years may be preparation for emergence that can no longer be avoided. If the ice is going to reveal their presence anyway, they may prefer to control the terms of that revelation. The convergence may not be a choice, it may be a necessity. Consider what revelation would mean for human civilization. Every religious tradition would face fundamental questions. Most faiths have specific teachings about humanity's place in creation. Evidence of non-human intelligence that predates all human religion would require theological reconsideration that could take generations to resolve. Every scientific framework would need revision. Our understanding of history, archaeology, and biology would need to incorporate the existence of an intelligence present on Earth since before our species existed. Every political system would be tested. Revelation that governments have hidden the most significant discovery in human history would shatter public trust. Questions about how to interact with the entities would create conflicts between nations with different interests and philosophies. This is why governments chose concealment, not because they want power for themselves, but because they calculated that chaos would be worse than dishonesty. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps they bought humanity time it needed to mature. But that time is running out. There are reasons for hope. In the decades since the Antarctic Treaty, humanity has achieved progress that would have seemed miraculous to previous generations. We've connected the world through technology. We've begun to understand the fundamental nature of reality. We've proven that international cooperation is possible on challenges too large for any single nation. The entities may be watching this progress. They may see in our achievements the seeds of the wisdom they're looking for, but there are also reasons for fear. The 2022 invasion of Ukraine shattered assumptions about international security. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed catastrophic failures in global coordination. Rising tensions between nuclear powers threaten conflicts that could spiral beyond control. Climate change accelerates toward catastrophe, while meaningful action stalls. Artificial intelligence develops faster than our ability to understand or regulate it. If the entities are evaluating whether humanity has achieved wisdom to match our power, The evidence of 2020 through 2024 is deeply troubling. Perhaps this is why Antarctic activity has been increasing. Perhaps the entities see the same trends we see and are preparing for one outcome or the other, preparing to welcome us if we pull back from the brink, preparing to preserve what they can if we fail. The translation suggests that species which fail the threshold are remembered, their artifacts are collected, their achievements are recorded, their genetic material is sometimes preserved. They become part of an archive, evidence that intelligent life arose on their world even if it couldn't sustain itself. The network beneath Antarctica may serve dual purposes, evaluation and preservation. The entities hope we succeed, but they're prepared if we don't. The next few decades will determine which category humanity falls into. This is the reality concealed for 65 years, not just that something exists beneath the ice, but that something is preparing to judge us, that our species faces a threshold moment that has been approaching since we first split the atom, that the choices we make in the coming years will determine whether humanity joins something vast and ancient or becomes another exhibit in a cosmic museum. The Antarctic Treaty was never just about containing a secret. It was about buying time. Time for humanity to mature. Time for us to develop the wisdom we would need. Time for us to prove ourselves worthy of what comes next. That time is nearly gone. Antarctica's glaciers are retreating faster than any model predicted. The signals from below grow stronger with each passing year. The monitoring system in Geneva shows indicators climbing toward the threshold that has been watched since 1978. The convergence is coming, whether we're ready or not, and perhaps that's the final test, not whether we were informed and prepared, but whether we can face the unknown with courage, wisdom, and unity, even when we didn't know it was coming, whether we can rise to a moment we didn't expect. The entities have been watching us for 12,000 years. They've seen our worst atrocities. They've seen our greatest achievements. They've seen us climb from caves to cathedrals, from stone tools to spacecraft, from tribal warfare to global civilization. They know what we're capable of. The question is whether we know it ourselves. The white shield is failing. The secrets are surfacing. The moment humanity was always building toward is almost here. What comes next is up to us.